And just so you know, this event is being recorded. I'll start in 2 minutes. My name is Norbert Goldfield. It's a pleasure to see a lot of beautiful black spaces in addition to the speakers. But definitely appreciate everybody who's on. And okay. I don't think that I intentionally put everybody. There is one person.
Hi, Dr. Goldfield. How are you, my friend?
Nice to see you.
Long time no seen.
I'm going to put everybody on mute. And it's a pleasure to see everybody. Um, and we'll start just for everybody's information in 1 minute. I always like to start close to being on time and then ending on time, if not a little bit early. So we're going to get started. My name is Norbert Goldfield, and I'm the founder and executive director of Ask Nurses and Doctors. I founded Ask Nurses and Doctors in 2018. Our mission is to work with health professionals like yourselves to either help candidates or incumbents get elected or work on legislation. So, for example, right now we have a contract working on medical debt legislation in Maine. We also are beginning to expand our networks in either competitive districts or swing states to help elect candidates or incumbents who prioritize healthcare reform. It's a pleasure to see many black boxes, but I know you're there. And what I'd like to do now is introduce Bill Fletcher and then Nadi Kaonga. Bill, I've known for quite a few years, and he's been an activist, as he writes in his bio, since his teen years. I still remember Bill. I guess I was 17 or 18, but that was about when Cambodia, the invasion of Cambodia occurred, and that was my introduction into political involvement. But bottom line being, upon graduating from college, Bill went to work as a welder in a shipyard and entering the labor union movement. Over the years, he's been active in workplace and community struggles, as well as electoral campaigns. He's worked for several labor unions, such as the AFL-CIO. He's also been former president of Trans-Africa Forum. And I also want to highlight that he's written some wonderful novels that I think you should all be aware of. Nadi Kaonga is a woman who I've just met in the last few months. And so it's a pleasure to start organizations such as Ask Nurses and Doctors, and because I meet wonderful new people like Nadi. Otherwise, if I hadn't started Ask Nurses and Doctors, I never would have met Nadi. So it's a real pleasure to see you. I love the way you describe yourself, and I'm going to read it straightforward. It's just wonderful. Nadi Kaonga is an instigator, global trekker, and a voracious reader. Uh, and she has been very much involved in many healthcare issues. Right now, she is in the Department of OBGYN at Emory University. She's worked on a number of global health initiatives, and I'm sure people will be happy to ask questions. So the format of tonight, which is the same as we started with the first session, where we had Heather Booth and a seasoned activist together with a young activist Brendan Prest. The format tonight is I'm going to ask them to speak for a few minutes about any number of issues that come to mind, and then we'll open up for conversation. Clearly, what we're intending to do with having this pairing of seasoned activists and young activists is for people to have a dialogue together. So all questions, please put your questions in the chat. You're, at least in theory, you should be on mute. The session is being recorded. And it will be on the website. We have these sessions once a month. The next session will be with Don Berwick, who at least many of the health professionals will know, and a medical student, Austin Vaughn. Then after that, in May, we'll have a session on deep canvassing, and we'll continue to do these as we begin to get actively involved in different aspects of different campaigns. I'm going to start out before I hand it over to Bill, and I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute. I want to highlight a couple things. First of all, I want to specifically welcome Dan Stone, who's on the Zoom. He has been a consultant and worked with Ask Nurses and Doctors. He's kindly waved his hand for years. He is an amazing op-ed and LTE writer, very widely published, and he serves as our consultant. So one of the asks I'm going to ask right now is I'm hoping each and every one of you will consider doing an LTE or op-ed that you will publish, seek to have published in one of your local newspapers on an issue of healthcare importance for the election. The second ask, which I'll repeat at the end, is for all of you, and I'll send out the notice at either tonight or tomorrow morning, to ask each and every one of you who are health professionals to consider doing for the Biden campaign. It's going to take no more than 5 minutes of your time, no more than 5 minutes of your time, to do a 15 to 30-second video on abortion, and in support of the Biden campaign perspective on this absolutely critical issue. And please copy me on it, but I'll send that out. So without further ado, I want to again, first of all, say thanks to Bill and Nadi for joining. And we'll start out with Bill first and then move on to Nadi.
Thank you, Norbert. And how much time do we have?
Good question. I promise for sure, all of you, that we'll be over by 9 o'clock. And who knows, if there's not a lot of questions or comments, we might be over early, but I'm hoping there's lots of good discussion and lots of trying to understand how we can push this issue to help get candidates elected or incumbents elected who have a passion for healthcare reform. So maximum.
How much time do I have right now?
Right now, I would say 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, that's good. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm trying to figure out who you said there was a veteran and a young person. I'm trying to figure out who's the young person and who's the veteran.
I'm going to leave that to the two of you to decide. I was trying to be very cognizant of using the word seasoned activists and young activists.
Yeah.
But the both of you could, I'm sure, fit into that category.
I'm glad to hear it. I just had a physical today, and I feel pretty young. So what I want to say is that this election is not about Biden and Trump. It's not about whether Biden is too old, particularly since Trump is not like a 25-year-old. This is an election, and it's also not an election just about the presidency. This truly is an election about two vastly different visions of the future. And that's what I think that we have to really talk with people about. That when you look at the January 1st coup attempt, when you look at the irrationalism that gripped the Trump administration and gripped many of its supporters during the height of the COVID pandemic and the challenge to science, the rise of this view that my opinion is as valuable as your facts, that tells us that this is not an ordinary election. One of the problems for quite a number of years is that every presidential election, we were being told by various people, this is the most important election in your life. And the problem is that, that actually was true, which I'll get to in a second. But more importantly, you keep telling people that, and the significance starts to dissipate. And people don't really understand that part of why this kept being said was that there were some very fundamental clashes that were emerging, very different views, and particularly as we've seen with the Republican Party having been captured by the Caligula wing of the political class and embracing dictatorship. That's when we know that the election is more than just about two different people. And that's part of what we have to talk about. When we look at what the Heritage Foundation is proposing in their Project 2025, or when we look at what the American Legislative Exchange Council is proposing with their efforts towards a constitutional convention, it becomes clear that this is not a Tweedledee, Tweedledum situation. It up and down the line, from the presidency to state legislatures, the battle is really about the future and whether or not what we're looking forward to is becoming a giant Hungary, not Hungary, Hungary, and whether we're moving in a direction where democracy is at best a formality. So there is such a great deal at stake, and it's of real importance when we look at issues of healthcare, and particularly the question of whether women have a right to control their own bodies, or whether that really is being left to someone else. And I think that the way that the Republicans most recently have been scurrying around after the Alabama Supreme Court decision on embryos shows you that even within their own ranks, they don't have complete unity. And they are quite worried because they've been trying to pull a fast one. And they've been trying to slip in that their views on abortion really are not that extreme. And we're seeing that they actually are, that this really is a handmaid's tale. I'll stop there.
Well, those are strong words. And two things. Number one, first of all, I want to welcome everybody to comment and or put questions in the chat for Bill and soon for Nadi. And secondly, I'm going to hand it over to both the seasoned and the young activist, Nadi Kaonga.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Bill. I can't agree more. I do want to also preface that these thoughts and opinions are my own. And I come from a family of activists. I think, Norbert, you don't yet know this, but my grandfather on my mom's side had been a freedom fighter in Malawi, where my family's originally from, and had been jailed for, speaking up for Malawians' rights at the time against colonial rule. And then my own father, he's a political activist and had essentially been in exile from Malawi for also speaking up, against injustices. And so I think having seen where the United States has been going over the course of the past, especially 10 years or so, has in many ways evoked, similar feelings, emotions, and reflections on political climate, political situations, but also you know, just these questions of like, well, what are the things that we can do, especially grounding it in social justice, grounding it in activism, or what can I specifically do as a part of my community, as a citizen of the world, not only the United States. And so that's really been one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, especially with this election season coming in. And then also in my role as a health provider, because I think there are many ways that as health providers, we can and should get involved in the political landscape, because as we can see now, there's a lot of legislation happening that's directly impacting how we give and provide patient care. And some of it is in antithesis to standard of care, to quality care, to health and human rights. And that's just wrong. And so I feel like by getting involved, by raising awareness, by being involved in like various different ways, and I'm happy to share, you know, like just some of the thoughts that I have about different ways providers can get involved besides running for office. But I think that there's a lot that can be done, especially given the roles that we do have in our communities. People do come to us. People do also, when we're out in the community, take our word. And I think that there's a lot of sway that we have, a lot of impact that we can have on people, on the decisions that they're making, especially if we call attention to the influence that it could have on how they access care and what it means for them.
Great. In terms of questions, do you want to talk a little bit, Nadi, in terms of, from your perspective, in terms of some of the strategies you've been taking over the last couple of years, and whether it's elections or not elections, in terms of trying to get your point of view across, and what have been your most effective strategies? And then I'm going to turn to you, Bill, for the same question from your perspective of and your engagement in a variety of electoral and union elections and activism.
Yeah, of course. So some of the different ways that I personally have been involved is, and this is maybe a non-traditional pathway of activism, but I feel that as a public health practitioner and researcher, my research is a form of advocacy and is a form of shedding light on a lot of the various like health disparities or challenges that are faced not only in the US health system, but also globally, and the impact that it has on patient care and patient outcomes. And then also related to that, I have also been working on various op-ed pieces as well, just highlighting various issues. But then other ways that I think have also been effective, and I think a lot of my colleagues do this really well, is when they actually go to their locals, like their state legislation, or even to the Capitol and meet with various politicians and call out different issues, have conversations, get to know who's who, and, you know, campaign for various changes. I feel like that's actually been quite effective. And then one of the other pieces, and I wish that I had been a little bit more involved in this, but the National Association for Obstetricians and Gynecologists in the US, that's ACOG, they had actually set up this QR code to help people get registered to vote within their state. And so some of my colleagues had figured out like we could get it printed and put on our badges to then add on to discussions with patients of like, hey, have you registered to vote yet? If you haven't, here are some of, you know, like the different issues, but then also this is a quick way, this is a quick link for you to just like register on your phone or know where you can go in order to register for voting. And I feel like that's really like high yield, but also like easy thing to do, to encourage people in the community to get involved with, like uh, local citizenship. And so those are some of the different ways that I've been involved, or also just engaging in different discussions and discourse with colleagues in particular. I try not to directly engage with patients just because that can have some weird ethical boundaries when it comes to direct patient care. But I think that there's a lot that my colleagues have also been doing that I feel like, we can learn really well from each other, learn really well from discussions like this, and then, get an opportunity to reflect and be able to enact some of the different ideas, thoughts, issues, et cetera, that people are able to bring up that maybe we haven't thought about.
Before I turn to you, Bill, I just want to make a couple comments. And again, I want to welcome people to start submitting questions via the chat. But I just want to follow up on a couple points. Number one, to be perfectly honest, I know about the organization called Vote ER, and we've tried to actually get them involved in our institution, and that's been a bit of a challenge. But I did not know about this QR code. And so is that QR code, is that applies nationwide?
Yes, it had applied nationwide.
And it's
I don't
still,
know if the campaign is still active, but I can look into it.
oh, okay, because I'd love to circulate that. And the second thing I wanted to or two more things. Number one is wasn't quite sure if I heard you correctly, that you do share the QR code with patients or you don't?
Yes, that part you do share with patients. So what some of my colleagues did is they put it on the back of their hospital badges. And so then they would ask patients, have you registered to vote? Do you know, and then we looked at like Georgia specific like dates for whenever there were opportunities to vote. And then they would say, if you haven't, here's this QR code to scan to register.
Great. Before I asked you my last question and then turn to Bill, I just want to highlight that Dr. Anil Kumar has joined, and he's on the Zoom, and he's running for Congress. So I just want to give a shout out for that, and I think that's really great. You could get more detail about it in his chat box. I think Eric Scherzer also had a question, and I'm going to ask him if he could just send it to everybody via the chat. That would be probably the most useful. But the one question that I wanted to follow up, or the one statement I wanted to follow up with, is the issue on the doing the work through healthcare research. Ask Nurses and Doctors is going to be starting to publish starting this weekend a set of, eventually it'll be about 30 pieces, but we'll start with between 5 and 10. And basically for each issue or controversy in healthcare, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, whether it's homelessness, whether it's nuclear war, a whole range, drug policy, opioid epidemic, a two-pager which will have suggested activist points that healthcare professional activists or political activists can take to their candidate or take to the incumbent to try to encourage them to take a stance on that particular issue. So that's very exciting. It'll be on the website, and I'll be sending some samples when I send out the recording. With that I just love the chat. I see a note from Nancy Statz writing a note to Dr. Kumar. So I want to thank Nancy for that. I'm now going to turn to Bill. If you could share for a few minutes some of your experiences that you would like to share with respect to either organizing on elections or organizing on the union side and your years of experience.
So I want to make 2 points. One in response to what Paul put about younger voters in Biden, and then I want to talk about MAGA. So with regard to younger voters, the principal thing is around the Gaza war. And I know that's not the subject of tonight's discussion, but I think that what we have to do is engage people of goodwill in a discussion about the issues that are at stake and what does it mean to either not vote or vote for a third party. In other words, if Trump is the nominee of the Republican Party and wins, does that actually make any difference? And I think that, as I mentioned before about the Heritage Foundation and ALEC and a number of other things, we can, the environment, we can point to where it does. That's a serious discussion that we need to have. The second thing I wanted to raise was about MAGA. One of the discussions I frequently engage in, find myself engaged in, is particularly in the trade union movement, but not just there. People will say, well, you know, we have a lot of MAGA people in our membership, or got MAGA people in my family or whatever, and I'm trying not to alienate them, etc. And I think that what's critical is to take a lesson from what we do in the union movement when we're organizing, and that you create categories, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, or sometimes just 1 to 3, sometimes up to 5. But the basic idea is that a 1 is someone who gets the program and you can count on. A 2 would be someone who is sympathetic, needs to be mobilized, it may be inconsistent. A 3, someone who vacillates, going back and forth. And a 4 is someone who is not going to be won over. They're stuck with the other side. They're people that I call zombies. And I have a doctorate in zombieism, and I've watched plenty of movies, so I definitely qualify for that. And I could tell you that as an expert on zombieism, when a human becomes a zombie, you cannot return to humanity. And that is what the core of the MAGA movement is. They're zombies. They've lost their empathy. It is highly unlikely that they can return to humanity. And so one of the things when we're doing our organizing is to understand who to spend time with and who not to. When you are encountering, whether it's in your family, I have a MAGA member in my family who was at one point my favorite cousin. We cannot talk politics. And when we do, it's sort of like missiles being fired across the demilitarized zone. There is absolutely no point to the discussion. Our differences are so completely vast that nothing productive comes out of the exchanges. When we're doing our organizing, when you're doing your door knocking or talking with colleagues or whatever, it's really important to make an assessment of where people are. And I happen to be very optimistic and believe that at least 75% of this country is sane and can be won over. And those are the people that you spend your time with. You do not spend your time with that core of people who are completely trapped inside of, well, let's put it like this. They're honorary members of the Flat Earth Society. You don't spend your time there. And this is not a moral question. There are some people that think that when I raise this, that I'm being very cold. No, this is not about morality. This is not about being mean to people. It's about we need to out-organize the other side. That means we need to spend time where it's going to actually make a difference, where we will be answering questions that are posed sincerely by people that don't want to go down a rabbit hole. And that's what I would pose to each of you. How to spend our time in the months between now and the election. Don't waste your time on people that are not moving over, even if they are nice people, seem to be nice, even if they seem to be engaged in discussions, it's just not worth it.
Nadi, Brendan Press raises a similar question to what Bill was beginning to answer. Brendan says, how do you both recommend engaging with people within your fields with vastly different opinions or goals? Bill started to answer that question. Or do you not, and instead focus on the fence folks, not necessarily trying to engage people in the community, but within healthcare or similar careers? So there's two parts to that. One is focusing on healthcare professionals, and then secondly, the issue of on the fence. When you address the issue, Bill, maybe I could also ask you, how do you see community activists engaging with healthcare professionals, and what can we do to reach out with to community organizations to use, or is there a way for us to use our health professional credibility? So when I turn to you, I'll ask you that question. Nadi?
Certainly, I think Dr. Prast, this is one of those difficult conversations that can sometimes arise. I think when I've engaged with colleagues about the current political climate, I think I don't want to generalize, but I think a lot of my colleagues and I, just being in OBGYN, are appalled by the current state of affairs in the United States and by the over legislation of people with uteri, and how it's impacting reproductive health. And so I think a lot of us tend to be in similar camps or in similar states of mind. So it's not often that I've actually engaged with a colleague who has a different political perspective. When I have, and as I'd mentioned, it's very rare, I try and remain open to discussion to kind of explore, like, well, why is it that they're thinking, in the pathway that they're thinking, or why is it that they're having like the thoughts or ideas that they have compared to my own. And really, I think to Bill's point, like trying to engage in a positive way, like where that there's going to be some form of discussion taking place. If I end up kind of like identifying that this is someone who is very steadfast in their ways, and that there's not really going to be like a truly open and transparent conversation that can enrich the both of us, then I tend to pull back. And that's just by nature of that would be a conversation that wouldn't necessarily go anywhere. I haven't met on the fence folks yet. If you have, let me know. But I know sometimes it's also difficult being in an echo chamber of like similar ideas, essentially. And so I think that there's definitely opportunity to be continuing to have conversations, but to also potentially spread those conversations outside of my department. And then in terms of, I think, or I guess maybe I'll hand it over to Bill in terms of like community engagement.
It's interesting. The people that are on the fence, I think about more as the vacillators. They're actually not exactly on the fence. They go back and forth. And they'll say certain things at one moment. You think, okay, they're on our side. And then all of a sudden, whack, you get slapped by some really outrageous remark. And those are people going back and forth, and they may believe that they're clear, but ultimately they're really trying to figure out which way is up. And that's very different than consolidated reactionaries. who have a very consistent worldview. And that's where it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend time, in my opinion. I think that healthcare professionals have and have had a major role to play, and often it's understated. And I think it gets understated because of this notion of professional objectivity or something, and being careful about taking stands. We're at a point where we need the voice of scientists. And that's what I look at healthcare professionals as. We need the voices of scientists. We need healthcare professionals to be speaking up about things like COVID. Or you think about what happened in the 80s with the HIV/AIDS pandemic and the proliferation of conspiracy theories. We need voices from progressive healthcare professionals on these issues. We need voices from progressive healthcare professionals about the implications of the laws that are being moved in Republican-dominated states. I'm thinking about the issue of repression. I'm thinking about the news reports that were given after the Alabama Supreme Court decision about medical facilities that were completely paralyzed, about how to deal with in vitro fertilization, and in effect, how to deal with women. And it wasn't just the Alabama decision. There have been other cases where this keeps coming up. And we need the voice of the healthcare professional on this. Regular people need to hear it. You are trusted. Even when people give you hell, you are trusted in a way that a lot of other professions, they don't have that. So I think that you have a very important role to play, and that role needs to be done through organization and through echo chambers. The voice needs to be heard around the country.
Bill, could I follow up and ask you, and again, and then I'm going to highlight a couple comments. Well, first of all, highlight a couple comments. Number one, I want to highlight there are a couple people who are emailing on the chat or sending a message on the chat as to how Ask Nurses and Doctors worked with a number of the people who are on the Zoom today to help elect Haley Stevens in Michigan. So I want to thank people for that. And there was about 40 health professionals in that district who worked on that. So that's really great. And we certainly hope that continues. And that's what that's what we're doing these events today, to try to impact I'm wondering if you have any particular suggestions, Bill, of health professionals in terms of trying to reach out to community groups or labor unions. Do we just sort of cold call labor unions or community groups saying, we'd like to be involved? Is there any way that we can be engaged in terms of some of the elections? And I want to highlight the point that Chris McGee said in the chat, that these elections, even though we have historically, we at Ask Nurses and Doctors have been involved in national elections, these elections for sure can be at a state level, local elections.
Right.
Those are important points that Chris McGee has raised. But I'm just wondering if you have suggestions for any of the health professionals on the Zoom as to how to best reach out to labor unions or community organizations offering our health professional credibility.
Well, I'm going to offer a couple of different suggestions. One, I'll save to the end about echo chambers. There are organizations out there like Seed the Vote, Working Families Party. There are any number of organizations out there that healthcare professionals can reach out to either as individuals or as organizations. And there will be, and there already are, statewide coalitions that are being constituted, which various organizations can affiliate with. So that's something that I would recommend. I'm not so much thinking about individual healthcare professionals calling different organizations and offering to speak or something like that. I mean, that has a value, but we don't have that kind of time. I think it's more about organizations. But the other thing is about echo chambers. Now, a lot of progressive people are unfamiliar with the concept of echo chambers. The political right is very familiar with echo chambers. And my first real encounter with the way echo chambers can operate was in the 2008 presidential election. In September 2008, George Will, the conservative columnist, wrote a column. And in the column, his thesis was that Barack Obama was the least experienced presidential candidate in 50 years, something like that. Now, leaving aside the content of that, what was interesting to me is a few days later, I started seeing that same point being made by other conservative columnists. But they didn't say anything like, well, as George Will said in the Washington Post. They each said it as if it was a conclusion that they had come to on their own. That's an echo chamber. And that's an echo chamber that was one of the sources of the echo chamber is the Heritage Foundation, which regularly sends out talking points to conservative columnists, people that have talk shows, that write columns, that have websites, that are active on Twitter, etc. Right? Now, progressives are really hit and miss when it comes to echo chambers. What will often happen is that somebody writes something that we like, and we applaud it, and maybe retweet it or post it on Facebook. But what we don't do is have an organized way that multiple people around the country can be conveying the same message in their own words. That's something you guys could do. A national network of healthcare professionals could serve as an echo chamber when you identify key opinion makers within your ranks, people that, for instance, might be active on Facebook or Twitter, or regularly write columns or letters to the editor, and are willing to do that. That becomes the base for your echo chamber. And that becomes very, very important. The political right understands this, which is why, I experienced this once when I gave a speech about US foreign policy that the political right didn't like. And man, they come after me with a hatchet. Or once when I gave a speech attacking the BJP in India as being crypto-fascists. And all of a sudden, these BJP supporters around the country started writing in. It was organized. It wasn't just that I had touched a raw nerve. We have to learn, and we can do that. And it becomes very important in terms of influencing opinion.
That's a tall order. Nadi, how do you respond to that? And then maybe you could also respond to, at the same time, Austin Vaughn's comment. How do you suggest bringing the extreme contrast between our candidates into primary focus? We know this time around that the media will not be balanced in presenting the candidates. What are strategies you have found effective to remind those that are younger, progressive, or even older, moderate, what is at stake long term? But that echo chamber comment, that's quite a challenge, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Nadi.
Yeah, I think Bill, what you've noted is probably like one of the other missing pieces when it comes to health providers organizing. It's only recently that various health entity, like health provider cadres, have been organizing. I think nurses have been forming unions for a while now, but it's only recently that we've had, like physicians, residents, which I mean are physicians, forming unions. But I think that that would probably be one of the big areas of opportunity is organizing various responses to different issues. And I don't necessarily have like the best way forward apart from organizations like Ask Nurses and Doctors, et cetera, where there is like this kind of concerted effort on like, here are the different issues that we know are going to be at play with the election. And then here are ways that we can, distribute various like factual information, especially as it relates to health implications. In terms of Austin's question, I think when I've been having conversations with people about the upcoming elections, for me, I always bring it back to the health issues because I feel like that's also what I know best and what I know the most. I kind of try and call attention to some of the different areas that concern me with some of the more right-leaning directions that things are taking and the implications that that ultimately has not only on individual health, but also community and society health and the cascade there that takes place. And, I feel like the data from the evidence pool is really hard to dispute numbers when it comes down to it. And so I feel like, at least for me, and like I had mentioned, for me, like my research is a form of advocacy. The numbers that tell the stories of what's going on for me are that form of advocacy. It's where I also feel the most comfortable. And so that's what I end up, coming back to.
Before I go back to Bill, I want to first of all say, and partly in response to Bill, that one of the actions everyone who's a health professional who feels comfortable on this Zoom call is to commit to doing an LTE or op-ed, and we have Dan Stone and others who are more than willing to review them to help make them as strong as possible, get them submitted, post them and repost them on the Ask Nurses and Doctors Facebook site. We don't do Twitter. I apologize. That we're not doing. But there is definitely, I think I very much appreciate that comment that you made, Bill, that we need to push that forward. With respect to what Nadi said, and then I'd like to look at a couple of the comments that are in the chat. That I want to highlight also what Nancy Stack said, that this relates to one of your comments, the issue of the engagement of the organized health professional community. I want everybody to know that I personally engaged with the president of the American Medical Association to try to get them involved, for example, with the LADAPO, the Surgeon General of Florida. No action, no interest at all. Not yet. I'm never, some of you know me personally, I'm never giving up, but so far, no action or interest. Or how about in the state of Massachusetts, where I live, there is a pending bill right now that's called SAPH 2, SAPH 2.0, that tries to advance and prepare for the next pandemic. And so far, the Mass Medical Society and the Mass Hospital Association have not lifted a finger to try to engage with it. So we need to push, but in the meantime, everybody on this call, I'm looking for two items. Number one is an LTE op-ed that we can help push, and we can help you, give you ideas as to the newspaper that you can publish it in. And in addition, that abortion video that certainly will not take more than 5 minutes of your time. And I'd like to turn to Bill and see if there are any comments from some of the conversation that we've had.
Well, I just noticed that Ashok has had his hand up, and I think one of the
I'm going to ask Ashok to send them a question via the chat, if you don't mind, Ashok.
No, I'm just one of your old students. You
Yeah.
said so many times. I think I met you every Wednesday. You said that write the op-ed, and we did that. That means a lot. So I just want to say hi to you and this brave doctor running, Dr. Kumar. I told you I'm working for him full time. So thank you so much for doing what you do, Dr. Goldfield. Salute to you. You're
Thank you.
amazing. Keep
We've
doing it.
been doing this work for quite a few years.
Well,
Bill, the floor is
yeah.
yours.
Well, I mean, there's any number of things that I think can be taken up. It takes organization, excuse me, but I think, for instance, you mentioned the Surgeon General, so-called in Florida. I think it would be really marvelous to mount a national campaign to demonstrate that the guy's an idiot and a dangerous one, and that I just saw a glance at an article the other day about many of the medical problems that are underway in Florida, in part because of this level of both denial and misinformation that's perpetrated by his office. So it's not exactly about the election, but it's all about the election, because it really is about the irrationalism that's out there. And I think that the voice of medical professionals needs to be heard. So, I mean, in some ways, it's like there's any number of targets that you can go after, but it needs to be persistent. It needs to be in an organized fashion. I keep ringing the bell about echo chambers everywhere I go, because I think by and large progressives have dropped the ball on it. We're sort of lazy. We instead of taking on an issue in an orchestrated way, we'll retweet or send text messages around. But what we don't do is build organized responses on various issues. For instance, why couldn't there be a national echo chamber discussion about the Surgeon General in Florida, calling upon him to resign, and calling and demanding his resignation? Why couldn't it be? It's not just a Florida issue. So let's make him, let's make him the bogeyman.
Well, before I turn back to Nadi and the thing, so there's a whole group of health professionals in Florida that work as part of Ask Nurses and Doctors, and we are hoping, and this could be the kickoff, or at least that's what I'm hoping will be the kickoff, that sometime in May, in partnership with Floridians for Democracy, we're hoping to have Scott Rivkees, who was the Surgeon General before Ladapo and who was fired by DeSantis, to have him speak, and we're via Zoom, and to have essentially different house parties throughout the state of Florida, organized by health professionals, and hopefully that would be the start. So that's one strategy that we're taking. So in fact, Scott is committed to telling me which days he's available in May, and to go from there. But I think that this echo chamber concept, I think, is absolutely critical, and one that, frankly, Ask Nurses and Doctors needs to learn a lot from. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Bill. We just have 4 minutes left, and I want to turn to Nadi to see if she has some reactions.
Yes, I mean, I was going to ask, do you think that some of those efforts in Florida could be shared with providers outside of Florida who
Yes.
maybe could, contribute as well, or at least like help circulate some of the different things that come out of whatever those, those brainstorming thinking sessions advocacy sessions, et cetera, are to kind of amplify the voices.
They will not only could amplify the voices, they hopefully will have contacts with other health professionals in Florida or other, shall we say, seasoned people in Florida who will have their own contacts with health professionals. So that's part of that echo chamber, rolling type of effort that we'd like to encourage. Eric Scherzer just commented, one of the ways that people can achieve protection is through, I just lost it. I don't know what happened to it. Is through collective action. One person writing in a letter calling for Dr. Ladapo's firing could be targeted. A full-page ad signed by hundreds of Florida docs would provide some protection for all. I think these are some of the strategies that we'll have to pursue. I just want to tell Eric that at this point, the vast majority of the people who are participating in Florida Ask Nurses and Doctors are all retired. Just so you get a sense, the people have been fired in Florida for taking any action, and it really would require a huge effort. But again, that's why we're having this conversation. I'd like to give a last couple moments to wrap up for both Nadi and Bill, and then I'll make a couple points, and then we'll stop. Nadi first, and then I'll have Bill have the last word, and then I'll have the very last words.
Awesome. I think hopefully a couple of things that people can take out of this discussion. I know, or at least maybe what I'll take out of this discussion is one, just really continuing to reflect on this idea of the echo chambers and collective action. I think, there's more solidarity, but also usually you can go a lot further in a group of people rather than alone. And so I think that there's power in numbers. And then the other piece is that, advocacy is going to look differently for everyone, but continuing to have conversations, trying to understand maybe, different perspectives may open up further conversation to be able to bring back to the issues that, people feel most comfortable in discussing, but also maybe have the ability to also continue to take action on. I think it's very important that we don't just sit on our hands, especially with this upcoming election. So I think this is a great group of people, a great organization of people who are very active, and I do hope that we'll continue to be able to have these conversations, but that they'll also kickstart a lot of different changes that we'll hopefully be able to see further in society in the coming years.
Thanks, Nadi. Bill, last word in a few seconds.
Yeah, in the 1980s, Reverend Jesse Jackson would talk about keep hope alive. And I thought that was, very compelling. But I think that what's really important right now is something different. I'd say the determination to win. That we need to have the determination to win. It's not just about hoping. It's not just about believing, well, eventually things will get better. Because maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's more about we need to be determined to win and to not be focusing on every possible negative thing that could happen and could go wrong. We don't, with these opinion polls around the presidential race, I tell people I stopped paying attention to opinion polls when Hillary Clinton won the election in 2016. And oh, that's right, she didn't. But the opinion polls up until election day said she was going to win. Determination to win, folks. That's what we have to do.
Totally agree. Bill, thank you, Nadi. Couple last points. Hope to see those abortion videos. Hope to see LTEs and op-eds. Importantly, and this is how I closed the last time, two things. Number one, April 4th with Don Berwick and Austin Vaughn. Number two, it's very important. This is really critical as we go forward and really pushing to win. Let's have fun while we're doing this work. It's important to have fun. Otherwise, you burn out, and I will never burn out. Bill knows me for years. Nadi's getting to know me. Such an honor to know you. Thanks to everybody who was on this call. Let's work together and win. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.